You're off Wi-Fi already.
Yeah. There we are.
Yeah. Hey, if you are just joining us, we will give everybody a couple minutes to get in the room and stuff. And thank you for joining us. But yeah, give us a minute so we can let everybody get logged in. Hello, Jojo. Hi, Tom. I'm Kenzie. We're just waiting for giving everybody a chance to get logged in, and then we will get started. Did you get your link?
What's that?
You got your link to put on social already?
I did, yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's all posted. Hey, Handel. Good evening. This dark and stormy night. It's always funny with weather like this because it feels like this is what a lot of us feel like Halloween is. But obviously for us in Southern California, it's not what Halloween usually is.
That's very true.
So I always get excited when we have the weather and I'll play my Halloween music. And it's like, oh, it's Halloween season, but it's obviously not really what we're used to for Halloween.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind a bit more sunshine lately, but.
Hey, Will. All right, so should we start going in again? Okay, thank you guys that are in the chat. We are going to, like in previous weeks, start this off as our regular podcast start so that we can also use it for the audio only version. We'll reiterate things as we go as people are still joining and everything. But please, as we go along, throw in your number 5, number 4, 3, and 2, and 1 as we go along, and we'll be reading some of those on the air as well. And we're always curious to see what you guys have to say about it all as well. So everybody ready?
I'm good.
All right.
Ted, ready?
Good to go.
Welcome to Parks and Cons, companion podcast of the parksandcons.com website and YouTube channel. We discuss cons, theme parks, collecting, and other fun stuff. It's April 9th, 2020. I'm your host, Sean. I'm here with Carmel.
Hi there.
And Ted.
Hello.
Parks and Cons, your on-the-spot podcast where we take you to the action of best conventions and themed entertainment events around. Today, we're going to be talking about our Knott's Scary Farm favorites in the other category. This is the 3rd episode in our Time Traveling with Ted series, where we go back and look at some fun things. And so far, they've all been Scary Farm focused, and we actually met this week and planned out some things for the future. So we'll talk about that a little as we go. If you're listening to this as audio only, we've been doing this as a regular thing every Thursday night, 7 p.m. Pacific time. So we'll be talking to our people in the chat as well. Please feel free to join us there. If you are in the chat with us, we greatly appreciate if you like this video and subscribe and help spread the word to let people know about it. All of that is greatly appreciated.
Definitely.
Okay, so to give a little bit of background again on what we are doing and why we're doing it and who we are, because it could be the first time for a couple people here, real quick for on this side of the microphone in our social distanced corner of California here is Sean and Carmel. We run Parks and Cons, a website that covers theme parks, conventions, and lots of Halloween things. We went to over 100 different Halloween attractions, yard displays, etc. Last Halloween season. And we grew up with Scary Farm. It really is a big part of our everything, really, when it comes to our interest in everything.
In our adult life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we didn't go much as kids. Or
yeah,
kids,
but high school-ish kids. So yeah, all of that. And Ted, want to introduce yourself for everybody?
Yeah. So my name is Ted Dougherty. I'm a writer, director, and producer for seasonal events and attractions with an emphasis on Halloween scary events, but especially for these episodes. What's kind of, I guess, most important, or one of the important aspects, is my roots are at Knott's Scary Farm. I worked there several seasons as one of the sliding monsters in the Ghost Town Scare Zone, and I've worked creatively with them on several different attractions within their entertainment department for Scary Farm. And just as a side little note in all of this is, the idea was to behind these special broadcasts, or to kind of create a diversion for not only myself, but for Sean and Carmel, and for any of you out there joining us. We didn't really know how long this was going to go or anything like that, and so we didn't really think about it too much other than that initial episode or two. But as long as theme parks and conventions are kind of shut down for right now, I mean, that's the lifeblood of this podcast of what Parks and Cons is. I mean, I'm here to join everybody in on these special episodes, as long as Sean and Carmel will have me, and as long as you guys continue joining us and hopefully digging what we're doing. I've been a fan of Parks and Cons for quite some time, and listen to their podcasts on the long LA commutes, and always loved their top 5 types of shows. And so I think we've really had a lot of fun the last couple of weeks doing these about Knott's Scary Farm. And for today's episode with the others, I think it's going to be pretty exciting as well. And just one little other small side note is, we really appreciate all of you guys that are joining us and listening to us, including Sean and Carmel. Thank you guys so much for having me, because this is a fun escape to kind of go back in time and visit these places of our past and help during these sort of trying times. So that's my 2 cents that I wanted to throw in.
Definitely. No, we thank you very much, because one, it's fun hanging out. And as you said, it's been a great distraction, not just doing the shows, but also talking during the week and kind of plotting things and planning things. And it's just been fun to have something really positive for, I know, at least the 3 of us every Thursday night. And hopefully the feedback we've gotten for several of the people tuning in as well. It's been a fun way to kind of just enjoy and think about what's specifically in front of us, which in this case is the others department of Knott's Scary Farm, which is a lot of fun. We do have plans. We did plot this week, and again, depending on how things go with the quarantine and all of that, but we have many more episodes planned. So we'll continue that. We also have plans for things outside the Scary Farm realm. We have more planned for in the Scary Farm realm. Next Thursday, we'll be back talking about our favorite memories, moments or memories from Scary Farm. The week after, do you want to tell them the topic for that one, Ted?
Yeah, I mean it's kind of a longer title, but I some folks kind of asked us about it, and we thought it would be fun, and so I'll be talking about the top 7 things about Origins, the Curse of Calico Maze, that you might have missed at Knott's Scary Farm.
Yeah, that should be fun. Some Origins talk, and we won't go into all the other shows that we've talked about doing, because things may change as well. But the next couple of weeks, we've got some really fun locked in plans, and basically for as long as this goes on, as Ted said, and you guys are interested in hanging out with us and listening and all of that stuff, we'll be coming back for those things. So are we ready to start talking some top 5?
We are. Yes.
All right.
Well, really quick, just if you're on the chat, that the YouTube aspect is like a 20-second delay or whatever. So if we don't get right to your question, it's because we've probably moved on a bit in the conversation. But if we see anything, I'm noting it. So that's also why I keep looking down, because I'm monitoring the chat on my phone and taking notes as things pop up. So we are watching. We do see the chat. It's just that it's a little delayed, so we may or may not be able to interject it as we are talking.
Right. All right. So this others category, this is something, if you do follow our podcast, we do the others category every year when we're talking about Halloween, and that includes things like hay rides and ride overlays and really truly that other, it could include anything that we feel don't include in those other categories. So we obviously have done shows now that covered shows, scare zones, and mazes. And so we kind of defined other now as anything else that we didn't in our own list cover in those past pieces there. So we'll continue, I guess, like we did last time, going through our 5. Carmel doesn't rank her 5, so her 5 are general. top 5, but not in a specific order. And then for Ted and I, we both have our top 5s locked in, and we both shared prior to starting that we don't know what each other has for 1 and 2, but our 1s and 2s flopped quite a bit in at least today. And so I'll be interested to hear what yours are.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and get started.
Yep, go for
on
it.
number 5. Now, my first year going to Knott's Scary Farm was way, way, way back when in 1987. And so growing up, going to Knott's Scary Farm for a lot of those years, there was actually sort of a beacon for the event. The way that you have these sort of icons like at the Disney parks, like the castles, or like Spaceship Earth at Epcot, or the Tree of Life at Animal Kingdom. Knott's Scary Farm actually had that type of statement for many, many years. It had its own, and it was actually the log ride. They brought back a more stylized version of it recently, but the log ride originally had a huge, scary skull at the top of that lift hill outside the tunnel where the logs come out. It was so cool. And I remember anytime you would end up going into Calico Square, you'd see that view of the log ride peak, and you saw that skull. You're just like, oh my gosh, we're here for sure. It's not Scary Farm. And also, for many, many years, what I think a lot of folks may not realize is that the log ride and the mine ride were like pretty much some of the main events at Scary Farm. Other than, Seymour or Wolfman Jack, later on Elvira, it was not the mazes at first. It was the log ride and the mine ride. And so the log ride was such a staple for so many years and needed to be somewhere on my top 5. And so then the question is all right, what was my favorite log ride overlay then for Scary Farm? So picture this. Right across the way from where, like, I guess Panda Express is now, where it was the shooting gallery for many years, but somewhere kind of by the main queuing area of the log ride, kind of where they have maybe near the exit, or kind of position where they have the souvenir pictures and stuff. Picture a full-size diesel truck parked out there with glowing green ooze pouring from the back of it, with a huge logo that says Noxico on the side of it. They've never had this type of statement before or since for the log ride. The little splashdown area had all these barrels, glowing green goo all over the place. And that's my number 5 choice. Toxic Terror Log Ride, 1988.
Wow.
So this is going way back when, but I remember the heck out of it. So I have a little excerpt from the internal attraction description.
Oh, cool.
So in the not too distant future, the Timber Mountain Logging Company has been acquired by Noxico Incorporated, a multinational conglomerate that manufactures chemicals, plastics, and industrial-grade phlegm. Employees, mutated by exposure to the fuming mixture of goo, delight in processing our guests right along with the bubbling waste. If the visitors survive being dunked in acid and sprayed with ooze, can they live through the final plunge into the sludge pond? Everything about this was all in, from the employees that are loading you into the log, party of 2 or whatever. I mean, they all had Noxico uniforms, and it was just very kind of gooey, gory, but it had a sense of humor about it that was just so memorable all these years later. And so it was just a complete thought. I mean, for years it was the Terror Mountain Log Ride, and they had different versions later on and stuff. But to me, nothing was as complete as this version. So that is why Toxic Terror Log Ride is my number 5 choice.
That's fantastic. Do you have any pictures of yourself with it? Any part of that?
No, I do have I have pictures in my book
Yeah.
that show it, yeah, no, this was before I started taking a
Right.
camera with
Yep.
me, and
Yep.
so no, but there's pictures out there. No video. I've
That's
never
awesome.
seen any video of it.
That's been one thing as we've been doing these shows. I've had more regret that I never realized I had before of not having pictures of a lot of things ourselves, but also pictures of us at, like, there's like every year there's one picture of us at, a dinner or things like that. But it's like, oh, why didn't we ever take any pictures in front of some of these facades or things like that, which
I
obviously nowadays
know.
is so much more common and also a lot easier to find now. That's an awesome one. Thank you. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
yeah.
All right, so I'll go ahead and go next with my number
Sure.
5. My number 5 is September 21st, 2016. We got to experience Fear VR 5150, which was a very short existence there, but it was a really, so it's interesting because there's a couple things that make my list, and this was something I was thinking about today that surprised me, because in general, I'm not a huge fan. And if you listen to the podcast, we've talked about this before, but a huge fan of like things where there's an additional charge. And I know for years, especially with going just once a year to Scary Farm, we never would do things that were any sort of upcharge or whatever. But in this case, experiencing a couple of these things, the experiences themselves I found have really stuck with me as memories. And when I thought about all the different overlays of the attractions and things like that, these were things that still really stuck. And Fear 5150 was this really fun intro. It was neat going into this room and kind of being drawn into the world, this smaller scale. And we'll talk about, I'm sure somewhere on some of our lists, skeleton keys get pulled in. I'd be surprised if not, it doesn't show up. And it's that same kind of idea. And it was such a unique thing to be at Knott's, to be used to being in these big, large scale situations with huge lines, and now to be in such a kind of intimate and small little group to go through this experience, to have the interaction with the actors pre-show, to have the virtual reality experience, and then to have interactions with the actors afterwards. And I found that it has really stuck with me, even though it was such a short-lived thing. It really has stuck in my memories. And when we talked about this list, it immediately jumped as like, well, that'll for sure be on my list. I wasn't sure where it would be, but I knew it would be on my list for sure. So that is my number 5.
Did that ever open to the public? I don't remember. I mean, because we did it as part of the
Yeah.
media preview.
Yeah. Did you
It
want to talk a little
did.
about Ted? Yeah.
Yeah, I could talk a little bit about it. Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. I co-wrote that with John Cook and David Love from Hollow Studios. I directed that, and it was a lot of fun to do that. There was a huge team of people that helped put that together. But yeah, it was open at Not Scary Farm, as well as up north
Great
at
America.
Great America. Originally it started off to be a skeleton key room. And once we got into production, and once we knew that this was going to last a little longer, or actually ended up being a lot longer than the time allotted for most skeleton key rooms, and especially once we started seeing the results of the testing and all that stuff for all the VR components and everything and all the 4D elements, I think management said, hey, you know what? I think this is, a strong enough experience to have as a standalone attraction. So that's awesome that it made your list.
Yeah.
The ill-fated Fear VR.
Yeah. And, so it's funny because then as it ties into Great America, just because we did journey up to haunt up at Great America that year. And after the change with the, whatever it was, petitions or people getting upset about the 5150 and the asylum, they had changed their asylum themed maze to Chaos House. And
Yep.
so remember, we didn't know that at first when we went up there, and we're like, what a weird theme. This maze is called Chaos House. But they had to kind of make sense on the run of what to do with one of their major attractions there. And it was.
And one of the map maps that we got, remember,
Yeah.
actually still had the old name on it.
Yeah,
So that was
yeah.
kind of cool. I think we have that somewhere.
Yeah, so I'm really, to me it was really sad that thing, all the work that did go into it, and then it was such a short-lived thing. But it does definitely stick out to me. As I said, when we first started talking others of all time, I thought this is something that was very different. It was unique, and to be honest, I think I value it even more now in retrospect than I did at the time. Because at the time it was such a flurry of things. It was the beginning of haunt season. There was a million new things going on. And I always find that's when we do our best ofs of anything episodes, it's always interesting to me what kind of sticks a few months later, or in this case, years later, of what kind of resonates. And then you get a better idea sometimes of how much something actually meant to you. So for those reasons, it is my number 5. And in our chat, if you guys want to go ahead and start throwing in, I think a couple people have already, but throw in your number 5s of others, and then we'll give it to Carmel to give hers.
Yes, again, mine aren't in any particular order. They're just top 5. And since you're already talking log ride, I'll just go to that one. And I put the Halloween Hootenanny, the more recent, obviously, version of the log ride overlay. And it's just fun. It's the ride, of course, is awesome in and of itself, but the crashed spaceship and the aliens, the fun party and stuff, and the party scene, I enjoy it. So I put that as one of mine, and I of course don't have any background information on it, but I enjoyed it, so it's one of my top 5.
Definitely.
Yeah, I enjoy it too. I think it's a lot of fun. Sean mentions this periodically, and this is such a great example of just a traditional Halloween type of fun vibe. It's a fun celebration, and I think with the cool soundtrack and all of that stuff, it was something that I think certainly reads well both in Knott's Scary Farm, especially back when they had talent in it, as well as Spooky Farm too, for the younger crowd.
Yes, definitely.
Totally. Let's see. So if you haven't already interjected your top 5 or your 5th number 5 for us to go over, please do so. Mitchell's number 5, it was the Halloween Hootenanny is his number 5. And then let's see.
A question maybe for Ted. John Cushman said, do you remember the monsters in the 80s, early 90s using a flash on their camera to set off everything in the old shooting gallery?
No.
Okay.
Not at all. No, that's such a specific memory that I'm pretty sure that it had to have happened, I guess.
Right.
But I don't specifically remember that now.
Right. And I'm not seeing any other number 5s in up there yet.
No, but
just a lot of love for Hootenanny and some of the others.
And
Hendel's
Fear
got
VR.
his 5150 button that he got to experience too. Wish they'd release that Hootenanny song. Yeah.
And Tim had joined us and said hi earlier.
Yep.
So hi, Tim.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. So if you, for the next round, so for number 4, if you want to start putting up your number 4s now, and we'll remind you, of course, when we get closer to it. But
right. Ted, want to take us to your number 4?
Yes. So in a couple of the past episodes, we've talked a lot about Knott's Scary Farm's past in terms of the amount of entertainment that the event had. Before because you guys started going in 1997, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So pretty much what I'm about to describe sort of died out before then, but any of the old time fans would remember that every single shop and food service at Knott's Berry Farm was decorated. Back in the early days, a lot of these places were outside concessionaires, including Log Ride and Mine Ride, until Hurlbut's people sold that to Knott's Berry Farm. So Knott's did not own all of these businesses. So they had internal contests on decorating your food service area, all of that stuff, shop and everything, and there would be all these prizes and stuff. So there was a ton of bits of entertainment that was throughout all of this, just so much attention to detail. And there's all these little nooks and crannies that you could kind of explore as a guest, especially in Ghost Town. And a huge part of Ghost Town back in the day was something named startling peek-ins, and they are my number 4 choice. If you don't know what those were, you still have peek-ins in Ghost Town with the assay office or the barber shop or whatever. You peek inside the windows and you see little sort of recreations of life back in the Old West. And certainly when they do Ghost Town Alive, they open those doors up and you can actually go inside those little buildings and interact with characters that are sort of tied to those locations. But back in the day, those were redecorated for Halloween. They were named Startling Peek-ins, and at its peak, they had 16 Startling Peek-ins spread throughout Ghost Town. Think about if you could even name 16 different locations inside Ghost Town.
All right.
So if you think about every single location basically being redecorated into this little mini scare type of situation. And it was everything from the assay office to even the blacksmith, all that stuff. And at points they did have live monsters hiding inside that would kind of blend in and pop out and scare the lowly onlooker. And each one of those peek-ins, though, would have their own little story, their own decorations, their own little soundtrack. And so you would go, and it was a destination. All of these things were a destination. And so that type of attention to detail was so all-encompassing for the event, even more so than it is even to this day. So that is why the Starling Peek-ins are my number 4 choice.
That's fantastic. So why did they fade away, do you think?
I think that the event started to get a lot more streamlined, and they started to emphasize, where they're going to put their focus on.
Yeah.
By the late 1980s, the focus started to really lean on the mazes. And, the peek-ins were part of park decor.
Okay.
And so after that was sort of done, I think once park decor started to kind of start phasing those peek-ins out, they started to really heavily involve decorating the remainder of the park.
Gotcha. That's fantastic. That's really, really cool. And that's not on my list. That does predate ours. That's awesome. Okay, so my number 4 is 2017, and it is, so I really felt like I wanted to include a skeleton key, and again, similar to Fear, it was one of those things that at the time I thought they were cool. I thought what was really interesting is they all, to me, were very different in the types of experiences they provided, and they were all things that I thought, well, if I just came for one night, even with the front of the line, I probably wouldn't have had time, or we wouldn't have had time to participate in that, but they really, again, stuck with me. And so Zozo and Visions and Slasher, and I decided for my number 4 is the version of Skeleton Key, Prey, which was in the Camp Snoopy area over where Pumpkin Eater is. I know Hendel's in our chat, who played a big role in that, and every time I just rewatched a video for it this week, and Hendel was there. That to me felt, whereas I enjoyed all of the skeleton keys, I felt that one, it felt like it was a full-on attraction, whereas the others were kind of, really quick hitting, and not that this was a long experience, but whether, once they set you free, the pre-show elements of talking to you, of intimidating you, of kind of bringing you into the world, and then I thought it was really fantastic where it did feel like you were being hunted. It really felt just like the title, Prey. And I always think that's a really neat thing when haunts, and that's obviously not a real common thing for theme park haunts a lot of times, to be chased. I mean, there's the scare forward, but a lot of times you have the jump scares in front of you. And this felt all about the hunt, and you were in this game. And we'll talk more, I'm sure, about some of these like game elements. But to me, it felt very much like playing a game. And in this case, I was the prey, obviously. And so it really stuck with me. I felt like it was a really full attraction, a full experience. And I just loved it. I just really loved it. Hendel says we kind of improved our own script for that. And yeah, so I think we only did it one time. And so the fact that it did stick with me all these years shows, to me, what a great experience it was. Because as we've talked about, these things where Carmel and I've only done them once, a lot of times they just don't stick in terms of memories. But this one sticks very clearly. And, so for those reasons, it makes my number 4.
Very cool.
And for those of you in the chat, if you haven't already, feel free to put in your number 4. Although Handel did also say that he's just going to keep saying whatever Ted picked because he loved the Peekins, especially with the live talent. So I guess Handel is just going to repeat everything you said, Ted. But,
okay.
But everyone else, feel free to type in your number 4. And so what I will speak about next, since you're talking skeleton keys, I'll go with, I put Zozo as
Nice.
one of the top 5. And that was the Ouija board demon stuff, and that was just so fun because it was kind of unexpected. I remember when, well, obviously we're going to talk spoilers. I almost was concerned about talking spoilers, but when the demon popped out of like the table and stuff, and because I don't get scared in these things, I didn't jump, but whoever we were in that room with was really, it really scared the people in there because they totally weren't expecting it. But it was just kind of unexpected, not something that you really expect at Knott's as part of Scary Farm. It was kind of different and stuff. So for those reasons, I put it on my list.
Yeah.
Great. I loved that. That was so much fun. And I thought it was probably the scariest of them all, at least for me. That was very, very cool.
Yeah. And I really like the way I mean, I definitely prefer for the big theme parks not to do these kind of small upcharge things, just me personally, because I think it's so hard with capacity. And I know even when we had the skeleton key, it was like we'd have to loop back around, even though, and stuff. So I'm not upset about them not existing, but I'm glad they did exist. And I'm glad we got to experience these ones because, again, in this case, all of those skeleton keys stay very clear in my head, even though I only did them once. Prey definitely sticks the most. I feel like I could do a walkthrough if we went over to the location with somebody of what our experience was of it. And maybe I couldn't with the other 3, but all 4, I remember us leaving and being like, that was a lot of fun. So yeah, congrats to everybody that worked on all those.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
Let's see. So Mitchell has his number 4 as being the Darling Clementine theme of A Mind Right.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, cool. That's a good one.
Yeah, definitely. That little girl that I keep thinking of, the hood, the hat thing that she wore was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, bonnet. Thank you. Let's see. Let's see. Michael, I think, is catching up. His number 5 is Prey, and then his number 4 is Headless Horseman at the Hollow in the opening.
Oh, I like that.
Which is really good.
Yeah.
I really like the Headless Horseman.
Yeah.
He was there. I totally didn't think about including that or whatever, but when it was always kind of cool to see the Headless Horseman at different parts of the park and stuff.
Yep.
It's fun. Let's see. John says wishes the skeleton key rooms would come back. Kind of made the front of the line pass into a full night of different attractions and getting the cool souvenir key. Those keys were really cool.
They were.
Let's see. House to Van as number 4, the soda machine in the queue for Red Moon Massacre, the best monster jump scares that I have seen. Does that count as other? And
I think that definitely counts.
Sure.
As I think that definitely counts. That's awesome. Those are good examples. Both of those last couple we've read there of like why it's so fun to see what other people have to say too, because it's like, oh yeah, that's awesome.
And then Handel commented, the poor talent crammed into that Zozo table.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about that aspect, but but from the attendee side, I enjoyed it quite a bit.
All right, so let's go ahead and go to our number 3 now, Ted.
So my number 3, I have a little story to tell. And so So my last year working as a Not Scary Farm monster was 2010. And so in 2011, we wanted to spread out and go see some other events. So we traveled all the way over to Florida to do horror nights out there, as well to do Busch Gardens Hallow Scream. And one of the reasons we rented a car to drive from Orlando all the way to Tampa was to specifically do one attraction inside Hallow Scream that was getting a lot of buzz at the time, named Alone. And it was the very first major theme park attraction that was time ticketed and an upcharge, and you had to sign a waiver. And it was like, oh my gosh, what are we getting ourselves into? And so we did it, and we absolutely loved it. We returned and provided all the information to Knott's as far as what we experienced. A little bit later that off season, I was invited to join a focus group about Not Scary Farm over at Amber Waves at the hotel, at the Knott's Berry Farm Hotel. And I was there. I think Norm from Horror Buzz was there, and I think Uncle Mike Hansen, my good friend, was there, and some younger fans, and some management. Jeff Tucker was there. Craig Harold was there, and I remember the question came up, and they asked the table, "Would you pay extra to go through a maze?" And most of the kids said no. And I said, "Well, wait a minute." I said, "Would you pay extra for a maze if I told you it was the scariest maze ever built for Not Scary Farm?" And they all said, yes. Needless to say, that following season, 2012, debuted Trapped. And that is my number 3 choice. They did such an excellent job. I remember that first year of Trapped, going through it, being kind of in the middle of this thing, and really being cognizant and saying, I don't feel like I'm at Not Scary Farm right now. Like, I don't know what's going on here, but I don't feel like this is Knott's whatsoever. I thought they did such a fun job. They did such an excellent job. It was over there, I guess, underneath what, well, Knott's Berry Tales is going to be now, but it was part of the arcade or the laser tag that they had at the time. And I thought it was just beautiful. I know they had some operational issues of getting a lot of folks through that thing, but it was a lot of fun. And I adored it. And so that's my number 3 other choice.
That's awesome. It's with Trapped, so outside of being able to time travel back to some, events prior to our time, Trapped is, I think, my most regrettable thing is we never experienced Trapped, because at the time we were going just that one night. And I remember Carmel and I would talk.
Well, I'm really cheap. So if there's something that we've already paid for, like, I am.
I just remember we couldn't even understand, like, why would somebody pay more? We've just got this one night. There's 10, however many different things. We won't even have time to do all the stuff we want to do to come up with the $75 for the group or whatever it was. And it was just like, oh, this is really interesting that anybody would do this. Good for them. But it didn't so the marketing, I guess, just missed us, because we were just like, and then obviously in retrospect, as I said, it's definitely the thing I regret most not being able to experience, because we were there, we could have experienced it. We love this sort of interactive type stuff in general. It just flew over our head what it even was.
Yeah, totally.
Well, that's okay. I mean, well, we know that Jeff Tucker did such a great job with it.
Yeah.
I know Gus Kruger worked on it as well, and I know all of the super talented tech people that helped put that whole thing together. I don't know. I'm sure there's probably video of it for somewhere out there that you could probably see, so you could at least, because I can't even remember all the different scenes. It certainly changed during its life at Not Scary Farm. But it was just really unique for that park, and so it was a lot of fun. But I understand why they don't do it any longer.
Yeah.
So
Same.
Totally. I think I heard a pretty good detailed description of it from Jeff Tucker's podcast. I want
Yeah.
to say
91
I
Reasons.
think they did a panel maybe somewhere.
Yeah, they did his panel
Yeah.
Midsummer.
And then
yeah.
I think he put the audio on his
Yeah.
podcast. So I think that's where I got a good detailed description. And I think he talked about, I guess it might have been Rafi at the time going through and stuff. And I guess as a preview. And so it sounded, sounds awesome in retrospect. But yeah, I even at like San Diego Comic-Con, there's so many things going on. It's like I refuse to pay for anything else since there's already enough free stuff to do. So
I don't blame you.
Totally for Trapped. It didn't even, I don't think I ever even humored really doing it like seriously. So
yeah, and so actually that then kind of, so my number 3 is kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, which is Calico Mine Ride 2013-2014, Witch's Keep. I love that was available during the day. It was a little less scary, but it was available today. And for me, there's also kind of I guess an emotional nostalgic thing is like, that was really the first Halloween experience my mom ever had. So I could take my mom on that during the day because I take her to Knott's all the time, like once a week practically during the day. And so she would be able to get on that. And I would always talk to her about things at Scary Farm, like over here, this is what happens here. And to this day, like she's the one always with me when I'm doing like these videos of them building, here's the facade for Origins or whatever. So being able to take her and kind of for her to see the mannequins that they would have in there, the static figures and some of the lighting and the fog and the music and stuff it was kind of for her like a tiny little slice of what we would experience at night. And I just love that. I love being able to do that in the day and then come back to it in the evening if we were, going with our friends or whatever it was. And I just thought it was a lot of fun all the way around, the way that they kind of adapted it into the daytime as well. So that's why it makes my number 3.
Cool. Awesome.
And not exactly for those reasons, but for similar reasons, it's on my list as well. So I'll speak about it.
Wow. Awesome.
Yeah, so I had Witch's Keep CMR, and I couldn't remember the exact year, but I love the greens, and it just felt very Halloween to me, and I enjoyed the witch and the whole thing, and then and I just lost my train of thought of what I was going to say. Just the other, well, not just the other day, but one of our last visits to Knott's when we went on CMR. I think I even commented that there should be a witch there that should be green in here.
Just all year long, there should be a witch in there. That's what
every
time we come in there, every time you come into the cavern, it's like, why isn't there a witch here? So yeah,
totally.
I agree.
So yeah, it's on my list as well.
All right, we'll check our chat.
Yeah, so those of you in the chat, if you haven't already, please put your number 3 in so we can take a look. Mitchell said his number 3 is Zozo Skeleton Key because Ouija board stuff gives him the heebie-jeebies. Let's see. Michael said Timber Mountain Halloween Hootenanny for him. AJ said My Bloody Valentine.
Clementine.
I'm sorry, Clementine. What did I say? Valentine, didn't I? My Bloody Clementine. It was old school and creepy. She owns one of the bonnets. That's very cool.
That's awesome.
Let's see. Sorry, I fell behind.
Number 3 for House to Van, fortune tellers in those tents, miss stumbling across cool stuff. Yeah, that's a good. I miss those types of things too.
Me too. Yeah.
It's a good one. And where was the other one? Handel says, can't remember the name. Maybe Ted does, but my number 3 is the Mine Ride, the year they had a giant dragon head in the glory hole in the early 90s.
I think it was like Threshold of Doom. That was so killer. I mean, there's a picture of it in my book. For anybody who's interested, I put that in there because you can see one of the people down there in the glory hole, and I put that in there on purpose so that way you could like see the scale of this dragon head that filled the entire glory hole. It was just massive. So cool. That was awesome.
That's awesome. That's
see.
cool.
John Cushman said, as cheesy as it was, I'd have to put Not Scary Tales as my number 3. And excuse our dog barking in the background because obviously we're at home and apparently, I don't know what's going on outside, but he's upset about something. Let's see.
I think that's all.
The Giant Witch Hand and Witch's Key was my heart. Did I can't remember? Oh, you read Handel's already.
Yeah. Mhm.
And you read House to Van. Okay, I
Fine.
think we're caught up. So,
All right, Ted, you want to give us your number? Two.
and let's see, it's
Yes, there's.
There you
It
are.
looks
You
like.
froze for a
Yeah,
second.
yeah. Are you guys with me? Yes.
You're.
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. So my number 2, I'm just deciding on this right now. So it is literally the biggest thing that has happened to Not Scary Farm. Literally,
Wow.
the entire 6-acre Camp Snoopy area being shut off from regular guest traffic and turned into a massive zombie apocalypse that very first year infected. I have that down as 2014.
Yep.
You know, this was right there in the middle of the whole Walking Dead craze. So the timing for this was just perfect. You know, my dear friend John Cook, this is where he really kind of put his name into Not Scary Farm design. If anybody's ever kind of wondered what it's like to work with John, that version of Infected is a perfect example. He goes all in and just bulldozes his way in and says, this is what it's going to be. And kind of similar to Trapped, I did not feel like I was at Knott's Berry Farm when I was running through that thing. I mean, I was, you know, we're running through the full like midway. It was just crazy. Really hopped up the whole idea of the interactivity element of kind of gamifying this whole experience to have that whole thing. And obviously, it's something that's worked really well, not just for Knott's Berry Farm, but for other theme parks. You know, because within a year or so after Infected debuted, we went back to Busch Gardens, Hollow Scream, and they had their own sort of laser tag version as well. And so, you know, the crazy thing about it too was that Camp Snoopy was open during the daytime. And so for them to flip this over in like whatever half hour, 45 minutes was just insanity. You know, the story was so fantastic. It was just so much freaking fun. But the reason it does not make my top of my others is because not everybody could go through it.
Yeah.
You know, if you were out of town and you didn't know, or if you were like coming in from, you know, Iowa or whatever for Not Scary Farm, and you didn't know that you needed to get there right at opening and race over to get your time slot, you didn't go.
Yeah.
You could not get it. So I know that was a big issue. And so obviously, as a result, it turned in more to a traditional maze all the way up till even last year. So that's the only sort of drawback was the amount of folks that got to go through it. It just wasn't everybody. And so I think that's part of that's the only sort of drawback. But otherwise, I think it was mind blowing. It was a total game changer. And it's my number 2 choice of others.
That's fantastic. And it is also my number 2. And I'm holding up to the camera one of the tickets from 2014. So yeah,
Nice.
Exactly as you said, is you would go right at rope drop, or actually a lot of times right before rope drop, and you would get a card to report to one of the 2 stations, which was also, you know, the whole idea that you had as that kind of matured the whole attraction. That to me, Infected, I think is the most fun I've ever had in a theme park, maybe. Which says a lot.
Wow.
I mean, because I love, you know, you and I talk about, you know, Horizons and space, you know, and all these things.
Yep.
But the adrenaline rush every time we went through it was just so fun. Comparing your scores, the leaderboard at the end. I love games that are like physical and you're out in the world. It's funny because I've not been a video game player in like 20 years, but to this day, any experience where we're up and moving, whenever it's with interactive entertainment, I love things where they, you kind of have to, run from one place to avoid something or things like that. That kind of cat and mouse game, I just love it. And so I fell in love with that and was heartbroken. But I totally understand from the macro scale, it just wasn't going to work because of the limited amount of people that could do it. But I was heartbroken when it moved from there. And to me, it was never as fun any other
Right.
way than it was in that first time. I thought that was such a huge success. And what's interesting to this day, people that live at Scary Farm and continue going to Knott Scary Farm to this day because of Infected 2014. 2014 is what Infected 2014 sold them on the idea of going to a Halloween event. So these are people that don't do any other Halloween attractions. They're not going to Horror Nights. They're not going to Dark Harbor. They're only going to Knott Scary Farm once a year because of those memories from Infected. And so for everything you said and all those reasons, why my number 2 as well.
Cool.
Awesome.
So for those of you in the chat, if you haven't already, please share your number 2 so we can go over those as well. But I'm sure it's going to be a big surprise to everybody, but Infected, your number 1 is also on my list.
Yay.
Again, mine's not in any order, but it is on my list. And I didn't talk about it right away because I feared it was probably going to be on your guys' list as well. But yeah, to me, the comment that I kind of had in my head was, it was amazing, despite the capacity issues, but because we were versed enough to know to go get the cards quickly, and we had the season pass at that point and stuff, we were able to do it multiple times and try to get the different sides and stuff. So yeah, obviously logistically taking up that much space when so few people relative to the amount of guests were able to do it obviously makes sense. But yeah, that year number 1 was so special and so incredible. It was really cool that we got to participate in it so many times, because I don't remember how many times, but we did.
Yeah, because that's when the
times.
season pass became a thing as well. So it just kind of married to that. So we would go on a Thursday night, with work the next morning, but we would go get our ticket right away, then maybe go eat dinner and Ghost Town Grill or something like that, and then go do Infected and then leave or something like that. But it was just always about trying to do Infected one more time. And yeah, it was a really game-changing thing. As you said, it was something that I found for a lot of people we knew that went to a lot of haunts, that maybe were people that were more so going to Horror Nights or things like that, that became a reason that they're like, oh wow, this is really outside the box, I've got to see this thing.
Yep.
So going to the chat, and now our cat has just joined. One of our cats has just joined us on the table. So if you hear that, that's what that is. She really wants attention tonight. Let's see. Michael said his number 2 is Infected year 1 as well. An amazing experience. Obviously, we all agree. Mitchell said number 2 for me is the Haunt Museum, the years that it was open, because I love seeing props and costumes and the history, and that's where he got Ted's book.
I love that pick.
Yay,
yeah,
that's a great pick.
That's a good one.
That is a good one. I didn't think to put the
museum
I
didn't think of that one either.
Neither did I.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Let's see. Hendel said his number 2 is pre-hanging slider shows.
Okay.
Sure.
Makes sense. Tim said that agreed that those were the best. Let's see. AJ said number 2 is Black Widow's Cavern.
House Divan.
There we go. House Divan said the pre-scare dinners that had prime rib and scalped potatoes. And the taunting monsters inhabiting the dining room.
Yes.
We love the pre-scare dinners. So
yes.
Yeah, if it's ever not a media night and we're going with more people or multiple people, we kind of force everybody to do the pre-scare, mostly for the advantage of getting into the park early, but definitely love the pre-scare dinners. Let's see.
Handel said honorable mention for the post-haunt breakfast buffet at CDR.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
I was always hungry at that point, but it was so late that by the time we went out, we never actually took the time to do it. So
Right.
And Mitchell has honorable mention before my number one pick, the flashlights and trick or treat lights out. It added just another layer to the maze.
That's cool.
And then
John said, too, you have to give it to the Green Witch and the Tricksters on the 40th, popping up in different mazes and ran all over the park.
Yeah,
that's cool.
That was really, we have a cool video of one of our friends that we took, that he was first time at Scary Farm. He was in a wheelchair and the Tricksters and the witch took him away in his wheelchair and just started walking him around for a while. And they put a hex on him on his head with some charcoal and stuff. And yeah, that was a lot of fun. I love those picks. I love all those picks.
Yeah. And also Michael had asked if there's any way to currently buy Ted's book. And I believe the answer is no, but Ted?
I believe you are right. The only way you can get it, I think, is eBay, probably. And sometimes you can get it for fairly affordable prices on eBay. I've seen it go, like, I think recently it went for like the retail value. But again, you kind of just have to watch for it because sometimes people try to gouge you. And I've seen it, for sale for like $350 too. So you just kind of have to keep your eyes peeled.
Definitely. All right. Want to take us home to your number one?
Yeah. So my number one, it's not an attraction.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an overall sort of experience that's specific inside the event. But it's something everybody can do. As a fan of Knott's Scary Farm, all those years, we've talked about it before, for so long, going to Knott's Scary Farm, you would especially before you started going, you would find out what day tickets go on sale. You would go over to, Ticketmaster or the box office or whatever, buy your ticket, and you would go to Knott's Scary Farm for your one time, and whatever mazes you go through, that's it. And so help you, whatever you can remember from that night, that's basically it. This number one choice is a Knott's Scary Farm fan's dream come true. I would have died to have had this. And so my number one choice is the Knott's Scary Farm annual pass. Because listen, that changed so many elements. The event now is designed for repeatability. That's why we have things like, multiple paths for things like Infected or Paranormal Inc. That's why we put so many bells and whistles into things like Origins. That's why shows like Puppet Up do so well, because people can go over and over and over again. And so because of that, I just was thinking about it, and as huge of an attraction Infected was that first year, no attraction's bigger than being able to go anytime you freaking want to Knott's Scary Farm. So that's my number one choice for the Knott's Scary Farm annual pass.
That's awesome. And that is, I totally agree with all that. It's funny because I'll get to my number one in a second, but I think we are on a similar track in terms of the thinking about it, but I hadn't thought of that, specifically of that, of the way that's impacted things. I mean, for us, it has been the most important thing. Like it just changed everything. The ability to go, to enjoy it, to take in the details, to be able to relax, to bring different groups of friends on different nights. Yeah, that's a fantastic one for sure.
Yeah, I didn't think of that as an other, but totally valid point. And
definitely.
Yeah, it's incredible to be able to go every night, and it's such a reasonable price. I don't remember
what Tim said right there, all for $80. Yeah.
I think it might have been less at the beginning too.
It's nuts. It's absolutely crazy. I mean, it's a separate topic of what Knott's has announced in this I think since the last time we recorded, about what they're doing of extending passes for 2021 with all this stuff.
Yeah.
Like everything about what they do these last however many years has been about like value, about helping people out, helping families out. It's just
Yep.
and it's just incredible. It's incredible. It makes it really easy to be a fan and to celebrate them and to root for them and all of that. It's so classy. So interestingly, in a similar path, though, I ended up at a different destination just because I didn't even think about the pass being an option. But for me, it was the pre-scare dinner for a similar idea of that. It was something accessible to all, that it brings you in and brings you up close to these characters and lets you interact with them a little bit. It was for us the first thing, it was our first experience back in 97 was doing that and being able, at the time it was across the street, and we've done it since. I mean, for us, Halloween is always about doing, going to the pre-scare dinner, and we try to do it more times now with the season pass. And for most of the friends that we bring, it's what we do with them is it's how we experience it. You get the advantage obviously of the time, but also just the hanging out and the music and the monsters and the food and so yeah, for me it's just such a cool experience. And it's the free refills throughout the night, like it adds so much value to the entire experience. It elongates the night, and it's been there for us so long. It's just, to me, I associate all of our memories with that being part of it. And if there was ever a Halloween night that we wouldn't be able to do that, it would be like really sad to me. Because as much as I love going to Ghost Town Grill, there's something about the buffet that's kind of like in our fiber, going back to like our first days and things like that. So for those reasons, the buffet or the pre-scare dinner is my number one.
Nice.
Very cool. And if you haven't already in the chat, put your number one, please do so. Now, for me, again, mine aren't in any order. So the last thing on my list that we haven't already discussed was the Black Magic Seance Skeleton Key Room.
Okay.
Wow, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
I don't know why it came to mind, but I'm not misremembering, right? That was a
No,
skeleton key the first year.
No.
Yeah.
That's on I have my little list of honorable mentions, and that is on my list. Yes. That was a fantastic.
Yeah. I don't know why I didn't think of that one. Yeah.
Yeah, and I had it listed as 2014. But yeah, the whole point was to bring Houdini back and stuff. But that was, again, such a different kind of intro into the maze and stuff. And you had to have the skeleton key and stuff to obviously experience it. And it was fun. And the actress doing the seance and stuff was cool. And the way the table moved and stuff. And I enjoyed it. I thought it was really cool and kind of different. So it was the last on my list that I haven't discussed.
That's great.
Awesome.
Did you have any honorable mentions that you wanted to do, Chad?
I do.
Okay.
So top on my list, if this was a list of 6, next up would have been pre-scare dinner.
Okay.
It started in 1993, and I went the very first year. I think I was just at Knott's Berry Farm or whatever, and I saw a flyer for it, and I actually have the original flyer that I got that year. And for years they didn't have the monsters, right? You just would go, but the big, huge key in this was you would get in 15 minutes earlier before the general public. And so you would get this massive head start and battle through the log ride, the mine ride. I mean, that would shave off like 4 hours of your night by just hitting those friggin' rides. It did go across the street, as you had mentioned, to the picnic areas. Over the years, as well as goes into chicken dinner restaurant every now and then. When I worked there as a talent, they started bringing the monsters in a little bit later. I think probably like the early 2000s, I'm thinking, is when we started having to go over there. And it was always kind of a pain in the butt to have to walk across the street and go underneath the boulevard as dressed up as a werewolf to go and entertain those people. But it was always a kind of a fun little experience going over there. Part of my tradition working in Ghost Town along with one of my scare partners. His character name is Gemini. We would start off our night going into pre-scare dinner with other characters like Chopper and Virus and other folks. And Gemini and my character Rage, we weren't very much talkers. So we would just be kind of the creepy atmosphere to kind of mess with people. And we would just do a couple of rounds going through Spurs or whatever. And it was a lot of fun. So I have fond memories of both pre-scare dinner as a guest, but as well as a talent, because it was part of my tradition that way. Next up on my list, it's two skeleton keys. I put in Zozo as well as Black Magic. I thought those, and I mean, and really the gunslinger one was so freaking cool too. And so I really liked those. But again, the reason the key rooms did not make it on my list as top 5 is because not everybody could do them. You know, they were upcharge, and you know, I mean, not everybody could do trapped either or infected. But for the key rooms, it was tough. Even if you had if you paid for it, there were times where you weren't even able to get through all the key rooms.
Yeah.
And then I have two more. Santa Claus Mountain for the log ride was, again, this was back at a time. I know he wouldn't say, but I'll say it. This was all Chris Williams before he went over to be art director for Universal Studios. So this was when he was a designer at Knott's Scary Farm. So the Toxic Mountain log ride and Santa Claus Mountain were his. And so he really brought in this feeling of humor with this really twisted gore and just fantastic, amazing decorations. And then last on my honorable mention, just because it has had a presence at theme parks globally, is sliding. Sliding is a huge other that, you know, I mean, yes, the event would be fine without sliding. Of course, I realize that, but it has enhanced it greatly, especially within the scare zones. So those are my honorable mentions.
Those are great. And I'm seeing in the chat some really fantastic number ones, some of which that we didn't talk about as well. It's amazing how long this list could be. Like we could have easily done a 10 or a 12 or a 15 or something like that. And so if you haven't already, go ahead and drop your number ones in the chat. Carmel's going to read those. And also then if you want to think, we have a few minutes, we're at about 65 minutes now. We can go ahead and maybe take a few questions from the group as well. If you want to think about those. Ted, I have a question for you that I'll ask that actually pertains to something you were just talking about, but let's go ahead and go to the chat first. Okay.
So Mitchell says, number one for me was Trapped. The year I went, the amount of scares I had that year was amazing. Layla said, my favorite others is the secret VIP maze at Sad Eye Joe's, which I've never experienced, but sounds cool.
I have. It's a joke. It's terrible.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Now I remember. Okay. Let's see. AJ said pre-scare buffet. And then let's see. Mitchell said Mad Eye Joe gets a special mention. Handel said what Ted said 1,000 times, but number one is dinner on the patio of Ghost Town Grill in the fog, which I didn't think.
That's a great one. That's a great one.
Yeah.
That's an awesome one.
Yeah. I do love that.
Last year we had trouble getting into Ghost Town Grill. It was like we had to pretty much rope drop it in order to get a table out in the fog. One of the times that we went. You
did, and so when I think it's a tradition. I know it's a tradition for you guys, but it's a tradition for my wife Rochelle and I to try to do that on Halloween night. Of course, you got to do the patio, right? You can't I mean, there's nothing, that'd be the worst torture in the world sitting inside the restaurant. But I remember what happened was it was like an hour wait, and somebody from your party had to be present, had to stay there. Like you couldn't just like put your name in and say, okay, I'll go on and catch a show and then come back. So basically we had to like take shifts and just kind of hang out or whatever for an hour. to get a table, because if you rope drop it, it's still daytime, and it's like, well, geez, I don't want to do it during the day. You want to do it in the middle of the fog, in the middle of the darkness, and all that stuff.
Right.
So maybe we'll see. Maybe they'll have some sort of system where we won't have to be stuck there. We could at least put our name in and then come back and check.
Right.
True. Let's see. Tim's number one was rope drop last year. So good.
Oh yeah,
that was
cool.
fantastic.
The tie-in with the
origins and everything.
stuff.
Yeah.
That was awesome. Let's see. House to Van said number one, thick fog pouring out of the park onto Beach Boulevard and somehow reach La Palma.
That's so good. I did not even think about that. And I don't know. I don't feel like we have a picture of that. I feel like that's a weird thing that Carmel and I don't have a picture of, but I can totally picture it.
Usually we'd be inside the park if the fog is out there.
Yeah, that's a good one.
We'll have to think about it next
Michael.
year. Michael said number one is Red Moon Massacre, the very first haunt attraction that he ever went through.
Very cool.
And then Layla, the secret VIP GTS maze, loved the sock puppets.
I still have mine.
Oh, you do?
I do.
That's awesome. Maybe a photo of that should be the picture for this podcast.
No.
Tim said that the picnic tables across the street. Yep, that's what I remember. The picnic tables for pre-scare dinner back in those days.
Yep. John said kind of liked the last year a theme maze was in the log ride. Always liked the Evil Dead movie, and getting to see Ash in a haunt overlay was cool. The logs just moved too quick.
Yeah.
And then John also said Elf Mountain was even more scary than Santa Claus Mountain.
Yeah, that's true.
And then Hendel said, grew up watching that fog over the walls van for years before he finally went in.
Oh, that's awesome. These are all good. So Ted, I had a question for you. And so we have a few minutes here. If you guys have questions for Ted or for us that you want to throw into the chat, we'll give you a couple of minutes to think about it. So Ted, my question for you, pre-scare dinner, is there a favorite food or favorite foods over the year? Is there something that's like that? Because for me, there are a couple things that are like that I really associate with the pre-scare dinner. What about for you?
Well, before I get to the answer, they were very sort of limited early on. It was not a buffet at first, and it had a very limited menu. I remember going with members of an old rock band that I was playing in. This is back in the mid '90s, and I dragged the whole band and all of our girlfriends and everybody to Knott Scary Farm. I'm like, we got to do this. And so we went to pre-scare, and my singer is vegan, or what? My former singer is vegan, and so they had nothing on the menu. And his birthday was that day, October 31st, and so the waitress was this little old lady that has probably been at like chicken dinner restaurant since like the 50s or whatever. And so the only thing she was able to bring him out was she put a little candle, lit a candle inside of a big baked potato. And that's the only thing that he got for pre-scare dinner.
Wow.
I've always been I've always loved the chicken fried steak and stuff at chicken dinner restaurant. I don't know if they might have had that like back in the day on the fixed menus, but my typical thing is well, first of course I need boysenberry punch, and then for food just a ton of mashed potatoes, and I always like to go to the I don't know what I'm sure he has a title, but the little chef guy that's like carving, little pieces of beef or whatever. I like to go to him because you don't really see that in regular restaurants as much anymore. And then I usually stay away from the chicken because it's usually like gets all over me. And so I usually do like mashed potatoes, some of that beef, and then corn. I'm getting hungry thinking of all of this. And then, like the deviled eggs is if I could remember going there, and like the shrimp. And then I will do some salad, and then I try to do what I can to save a little room for dessert. So I won't do boysenberry pie. I'll usually do like an apple pie.
Okay.
So
good.
What about you guys?
Well, I think For
Go ahead.
Sean, well, I have to think about mine, but I think the two things that you associate with, tell me if I'm wrong, with pre-scare are the hard-boiled eggs,
The deviled eggs.
the deviled
Yep,
eggs. That's
yep,
what
It's
it's
like the only time out of the year that I eat deviled eggs, but it's always there. And it's always like, oh, I'm going to eat a ton of them. And then it's always like the eyes are bigger than, you really want to eat or whatever.
Yep.
So I only eat a couple of them. But yeah, that's true.
that, and then the chocolate cake with little sprinkles on
That's true. The little
Ooh.
thin, super soft chocolate cake that they don't really serve the exact same thing in the park the rest of the year. So you have to go to pre-scare for both of those things. So yeah, and I love the salad and a bunch of the other things, but those are the two things. And that's actually the hotel version. The last few years they've had a kind of a different menu
Oh,
what they
really?
offered. And so I went with a friend a couple years back and they didn't have the deviled eggs. And it's like, well, this place is out now. So can't we can't go here for the deviled eggs without the deviled eggs.
And Mitchell is saying the chili is my favorite. Handel said the
Ooh.
boysenberry meatballs they don't have anymore.
Yeah.
Mitchell said, and when they had meatballs, he was all over that.
They
I'm-
are firmly against boysenberry meatballs at this moment in time for whatever reason.
I
And
don't
I'm
know
with Kendall.
why.
I love the boysenberry meatballs. They had said something about that they need to change it up and keep it exciting. But yeah, I wish the boysenberry meatballs were always there.
the head chef person
Yeah.
is like relatively new, I think,
Yeah.
and I think she's kind of
She said
wants
there needed to be a break.
make her own mark or something. So yeah, even at media events, we're not getting them anymore.
Yeah.
So Tim commented that he was so bummed when they stopped theming the sipper bottles,
Yeah.
that it was one of the highlights of the pre-scare dinner.
That was cool.
Mhm.
Let's see. Mitchell said, as I recall, they had pot roast last year.
Mhm.
Oh
And
yeah, I
then-
think they did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. The pumpkin soup for
And-
AJ.
Yeah, AJ commented on the pumpkin soup with the
Mitchell
little
said-
emoji with the tongue hanging out.
Eh.
And Mitchell also said the pumpkin soup. I'm not a big fan of the pumpkin soup, but I do like the chili a lot. So
I have a question for the two of you.
Okay.
yes.
So we know that you've been going to pre-scare dinner since 1997, right?
Yep.
And I know that you have a Halloween tradition that's very similar to what Rochelle and I do. But is there any sort of maybe? And I know that you guys go now to Knott Scary Farm because of that annual pass quite often. In
Yeah.
between, all 900 and 100 whatever plus stops along the way. But is there a tradition that you guys have that you could share with all of us that is maybe something that you do, and maybe you don't even really necessarily think about it all the time, but it's a tradition that you guys share when you guys show up to Knott Scary Farm, and it's 3 or 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, dusk, you're headed in. What is your guys's like sort of like maybe fun tradition that you guys share throughout maybe all these years, or maybe even a more recent tradition, but just some sort of tradition that you guys share?
Well, I mean, prior to there being the pass where we were going so often, it was definitely doing the pre-scare dinner. And in the earlier years before our friends had kids and stuff and stopped going with us on Halloween, we always did the pre-scare. We focused on the mazes. We really didn't do rides. But then every year we would take a picture with the group, and it was funny because for those first few years, it was like really cold on Halloween. And so we would all be in our sweatshirts and in our beanies and stuff. And then after a few years, it started to get too warm on Halloween. And so then we would just carry our sweatshirts and our beanies for the photo because we wanted to maintain that photo tradition.
Well,
But
part of that tradition was literally every year. That's when we would buy a new sweatshirt. Like it was like, okay, it's time to buy a new sweatshirt. And that was part of the workup. Is we're coming into October. It's like, okay, it's starting to get cold. We're going to Knott Scary Farm. We're going to take our pictures with the monsters out front by the main gate. And every year we would be in a different sweatshirt because and as you said, eventually then it was like it got warmer. And now if we do it, it's like everybody's in t-shirts and shorts because it's just too hot to wear a sweatshirt at all. But yeah,
Right.
buying the sweatshirts was the first tradition outside of pre-scare dinner that I remember.
Yeah.
Also a tradition for us has been to try, if possible, to stay at the Knott's Hotel on Halloween night. We've tried to do
cool.
that as many. We've not have done it every year, but we try, if at all possible, to do that. Staying, I mean, if we could stay at the hotel every time, it is so kind of neat getting there extra early and being in the room and getting the card key that has the monster on it. And then they already have kind of a creepy Scary Farm vibe, like the Shining kind of vibe when you look down the hallway and stuff. So to me, that's one of the places that feels like Halloween all year long to me, just because we associate it so much with that.
Sure.
And then staying there and trying to get there. But I think those are probably the main things. I mean, anytime I'm in any sort of place that has like stores, I always like, so even though we know what the Scary Farm merchandise is, I always check the store, because it's just like, oh, do they have a new pin or a new shirt, or is anything on discount or things like that?
Right.
For me, the last few years, or since we've had the pass, it's been really important to take at least 5 or 10 minutes just standing in the fog in Ghost Town and watching the monsters work, which is something we never had time for when we were younger, but just watching them, or following someone like, the bride around and watching her work, and just, marveling at how, in tune they are and how they collaborate and work together and scare people. I love all of that.
Totally.
Awesome.
What about for you? Any other traditions for you?
I got a ton, but just a couple. So when we were old enough to start going by ourselves with my friends and stuff like that, we would stay, because we were basically in high school and couldn't afford anything better. We would stay at the Gaslight Motel that was right there on Beach Boulevard. And I still have such fond nostalgic love for the Gaslight Motel, because that's where we would stay. And I mean, I still have a postcard from the Gaslight Motel, an ashtray from it, just as because it's been long gone and ripped out years and years ago. But the older we got, once we got into college, or started getting jobs and stuff like that, we got better rooms. We would stay at the Embassy Suites when it was still the Embassy Suites. I think it's now the Radisson or whatever's down there. And so that was always a nice, stay. And then, of course, once we started staying at the Buena Park Hotel, which is now the Knott's Hotel, that's sort of the ultimate, right? And back then, the pre-scare was still over at what is now Spurs. They didn't have a pre-scare as part of a hotel package. In fact, when we were doing it, they didn't have any sort of Knott's Scary Farm hotel package at all. It was just, you were just staying there and you would just walk over. But that was a thing for all the years that I was going as a guest. I would always certainly stay. I live up in the San Gabriel Valley, and that's where I grew up. And so it was easier to just stay down in Buena Park anytime we would be at Knott's Scary Farm, instead of driving 45 minutes to an hour home, at 2-3 o'clock in the morning. But that's at least one little tradition. And then maybe I'll share a couple more in the future, maybe at next week's episode too. But
sounds good.
But either way, everybody listening to this, you guys all have your own traditions too. Whether or not if you're a monster, certainly you have your own tradition on how you get ready and how you prepare for each evening and all that stuff. And the fans, we're all doing the same thing too. When maybe it's a special shirt that you like to wear, or a special hat, or your lucky watch, or whatever it is, or you got to go in, at this gate specifically, or whatever. I mean, everybody has their own sort of little tradition. And that's why I wanted to kind of ask you guys about it, because I think it's kind of a fun little thing, because I think everybody has their own.
Yeah.
Totally.
Well, and your question inspired some in the chat, because there are some traditions in there. So want to read those, Carmel?
Yeah. So Tyndall said that Dead Man's Party in the car on the way over, Del Taco on the way home.
That's awesome.
There you go. You go.
And all this talk about food, and you bringing up Del Taco, I feel like we might have to drive through or something, because I'm getting hungry now. Let's see. Mitchell said, my tradition was always pre-scare, then Ghost Rider, which after a buffet was a very bad idea, and the mazes by Ghost Rider.
Yep.
And then Michael said, opening night has been a tradition lately, just getting there for opening night.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very cool. Tim said, I always go once with my mom for the last 30 years.
That's
Oh,
fantastic.
that's wonderful.
That's awesome.
Wow, that's a long
Yeah,
run.
that's cool. That's really cool.
Let's see. Tony said, during the last 10 years. Oh, okay. That's a question. So let me go back to that really quick. Michael said, cool, Tim. I have gone at least once a season with my dad since our first visit in 2003. Tony said the asylum finale at Paranormal Inc. was awesome with the scrim effect.
Awesome.
Agree.
Awesome.
And then Tony's question was, during the last 10 years, how have haunt mazes at Not Scary Farm changed in terms of design, storytelling, and scares?
Well, we kind of touched that topic a little bit a couple episodes ago when we were talking about, our top mazes. But I think, to reiterate what we talked about there is the event is built and designed as a whole to improve every single year. And so that's how, that they are absolutely improving every year in terms of their storytelling and through immersion and things like Trapped and Infected are solid examples of that, as well as things like what we did with Origins or things like Paranormal Inc. If you take those types of attractions and you compare them and you look at them side by side to things that have been going on 15, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I mean, the production value is skyrocketed. In terms of the story, the amount of talent, all of that stuff, and everything has just been so much more rich and just bolstered year after year after year. So I think it's really kind of all of the above as far as what makes these mazes better, especially the last 10 years in terms of technology, all that stuff.
Yeah, it really was something seen. What was it, about 2 years ago? The last year for, or was the last year? The year that Trick or Treat went to lights out. And I remember them testing music in there in February. And so it was February, and we were walking by, leaving in the marketplace area and hearing the Halloween music. And it was like, wow. And it just, and then obviously Waxworks being done, pretty much done last year so early. And then this year seeing, during Peanuts celebration that they're working away on the old Shadowlands site. And it really is something how it's become such a, labor throughout the year to build, to not just think about it, but to actually be out there building and painting and creating all those. And as you said, like the product now is so off the charts, and it's always kind of crazy the last couple of years to think about like what could the future hold, because it does seem like the bar keeps getting raised and raised and raised, and it's such a great event now. And we obviously love it so much that we're here talking about it like this. To imagine what it could be for, let's say, the 50th anniversary or the
Yep.
60th or 75th or whatever it might be
Yeah.
is like kind of staggering.
It is. Yeah.
Well, should we go ahead and wrap up there? I'm not seeing any other questions. Did I miss anything else in the chat?
I
think
so.
we're good.
I think so.
All right. So then if you haven't already, please like this video if you are tuning in with us live. If you are interested, if you're listening to us on the audio feed, again, next Thursday night, 7 p.m. Pacific, we will be back talking about our favorite memories of Halloween Haunt, Not Scary Farm. So join us and bring yours as well. I think there'll be a lot of fun nostalgia and moments wrapped up in there. A lot of personal history, obviously, for a lot of people. One of the things I think that does make the event so unique is, when you hear someone like Tim talk about 30 years of going with his mom, like there's a lot of like family that ties into it beyond even just being employed there. For all of us, a lot of really special memories there. We once again want to thank all of our Parks and Cons crew, everybody that supports us over there on Patreon and part of the Mighty Networks. We do try to put up bonus content there. So if you are interested, there's 17 or 18 separate podcasts over there as well. A bunch of them on things related to Scary Farm and other things. If you've not already done so, please consider leaving us reviews wherever it is you find the podcast. You can follow along with us on social media. Hopefully, we will be bringing you lots of fun Halloween during the Halloween season this year. So you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, of course. There's tons of YouTube videos there now of Halloween if you're looking for a Halloween fix right now as well. Wrapping up, talking all things other in the Not Scary Farm Best of category or Time Travel with Ted. Until next time, we'll see you in line somewhere.
Night, guys.
Good
Thank
night,
you, guys.
everybody.
Night, everybody. Thank you guys very much. Have a great week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.